At midnight, deep inside a sealed Soviet command bunker, a red word appeared on a screen: launch. One computer warning said America had fired a nuclear missile. Then another warning came. Then another. Within minutes, one man had to decide whether the world was ending or whether the machine was lying. This was not a drill in an ordinary year. It was 1983, one of the most dangerous years of the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union were armed with enough nuclear weapons to destroy civilization many times over, and both sides believed the other might strike first. The bunker was called Serpukhov 15, hidden outside Moscow, built not for glory, but for fear. It was designed to watch the skies, read signals from Soviet satellites, and warn the Kremlin if American missiles rose from the horizon. Inside that bunker sat Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, an officer of the Soviet Air Defense Forces. His job was not to stop a war with weapons. His job was to report what the warning system told him. And that night, the system told him the impossible. To understand why one blinking screen mattered, we have to enter the mind of the Cold War. Both superpowers lived under a terrible logic. If one side launched nuclear weapons, the other had only minutes to respond before its own missiles could be destroyed. This was called launch on warning, and it was built on speed. Satellites saw heat. Computers judged patterns. Officers passed alerts upward. Political leaders could be rushed toward a decision before the first explosion even touched the ground. The promise was deterrence. The danger was automation. A false signal, a misread radar, or a single human panic could turn fear into fire before anyone had time to ask whether the warning was real. In March 1983, President Ronald Reagan announced a new space-based defense vision in the United States. In Moscow, Soviet leaders saw not just defense, but a possible attempt to weaken their ability to retaliate. That same year, language between the superpowers hardened. Speeches became sharper. Military exercises grew more realistic. Intelligence officers searched for signs that the other side was preparing for a surprise attack. Then, on September 1st, 1983, a passenger airliner, Korean Airlines Flight 007, drifted into Soviet airspace. Soviet fighters shot it down. All 269 people on board were killed. The world was stunned, and Washington accused Moscow of barbarity. In the Soviet Union, leaders feared Western outrage could become military pressure. In America, leaders saw Soviet paranoia and secrecy. Both sides looked at the same events and saw proof that the other side was dangerous. Only 25 days later, Petrov arrived for his overnight shift. He was not supposed to become a legend. He was supposed to supervise screens, phones, maps, and a young warning system that promised to see the first flash of nuclear war. The room was controlled and disciplined, but underneath the routine lived an unspoken fear. Every officer knew that if the alarm came, the timeline would be brutal. A missile from the United States could reach Soviet territory in roughly half an hour. A few minutes might be all the Soviet leadership had to decide whether to retaliate. A few minutes might decide whether cities survived. A few minutes might decide whether history continued. Petrov understood the system because he had worked with it. He knew its purpose, its power, and its weaknesses. He also knew that computers could present certainty even when reality was uncertain. The first hours of the night passed quietly. The bunker hummed with machines. Operators watched their stations. Outside, darkness covered the forests near Moscow. Above the planet, satellites moved through orbit. Then, the siren sounded. A warning appeared. One missile had launched from the United States. The room changed instantly. Calm became calculation. Officers looked to the screens. Phones waited. The chain of command expected information, and information in this system moved upward like electricity. On the display, the alert did not whisper. It declared. The system identified a launch. The computer judged it highly reliable. The machine was telling the Soviet Union that nuclear war had begun. Petrov stared at the warning and felt the pressure of doctrine. His duty was to report. His training told him that delay could be fatal. But another part of his mind asked a question the machine could not answer. Why only one missile? A true American first strike, he reasoned, would likely involve hundreds of missiles, not one. A single missile would not destroy Soviet retaliation. A single missile would invite the end of the United States. The room waited. Seconds passed heavily. Every passing moment felt like betrayal if the warning was real. Every rushed report felt like catastrophe if the warning was false. Then the system escalated. It detected another missile. Then another. Then another. Then another. Now the screen suggested 5 American missiles were inbound. Not one strange signal, but a pattern. The computer had gained confidence, and with every warning, the burden on Petrov became heavier. Around him, procedure demanded action. The Soviet command system existed because hesitation could kill. But that night, hesitation was also the only thing standing between a machine error and a possible nuclear response. Petrov needed confirmation from ground-based radar. Satellites could see a launch early, but radar would later confirm objects crossing the horizon. The radar confirmation did not come. That absence mattered. It did not prove safety, but it planted doubt. The satellites were screaming. The radars were silent. The computer demanded belief. Reality refused to confirm it. In a nuclear crisis, uncertainty is poison. Leaders do not receive perfect truth. They receive fragments, warnings, probabilities, and fear. Petrov was living inside that poison in real time. He could not know the system was wrong. He could only judge whether it was likely wrong. And if he judged incorrectly, the consequences would be beyond imagination. He reached a conclusion that went against the screen. He reported the warning as a false alarm. The decision did not end the danger. It began the waiting. If missiles were real, they would soon arrive. If he was wrong, Soviet cities would pay the price for his doubt. The bunker remained tense. Operators watched for new confirmation. Every second stretched. The imagined missiles were crossing invisible distances on the map, or perhaps they had never existed at all. Petrov later said he felt as if he were sitting on a hot frying pan. That image captures the moment better than any strategic phrase. This was not theory. This was a man sweating under the weight of civilization. Minutes passed. No explosions came. No radar confirmation arrived. The warning began to look less like an attack and more like a wound in the machine. At last, the terrible window closed. The supposed missiles should have reached Soviet territory. They did not. The world, unknowingly, had survived. The system had been wrong. Later analysis found that sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds had confused Soviet satellites. The machine had seen light and imagined missiles. It had mistaken a natural reflection for the opening move of World War III. But the most frightening part is not that a system failed. Systems fail. The most frightening part is that the failure entered a world already prepared to believe the worst. In calmer times, an alarm might be questioned. In 1983, every alarm arrived wrapped in suspicion. The superpowers had built not only weapons, but expectations of betrayal. Petrov did not save the world by pressing a heroic button. He saved it by refusing to let a machine's confidence replace human judgment. For his actions, he was not immediately celebrated as a hero. The incident was secret. Soviet authorities did not want to advertise that their early warning system had nearly created a disaster. Instead of public praise, Petrov faced questioning. He was criticized for paperwork. The system had failed, but institutions often defend themselves by blaming the person who exposes the failure. Years passed before the story became widely known. By then, the Soviet Union itself had collapsed. The man who had once stood between error and escalation lived quietly, far from the dramatic myth the world later built around him. But his story is not only about one man. It is about the dangerous relationship between technology, fear, and authority. Modern military systems are built to be fast because missiles are fast. But speed creates a trap. The faster a system moves, the less time humans have to doubt it. In nuclear strategy, doubt can be dangerous, but blind certainty can be worse. The Cold War was filled with near misses, radar errors, training tapes, misunderstood exercises, lost aircraft, and accidental alerts all revealed the same truth. Civilization often survived not because systems were perfect, but because someone paused. In November 1983, only weeks after Petrov's night in the bunker. NATO ran a command post exercise called Able Archer. Able Archer simulated nuclear release procedures. Some Soviet observers feared it might be cover for a real strike. Soviet forces showed unusual alert activity. Western intelligence later recognized that the danger had been more serious than many officials understood at the time. The pattern is chilling. September gave the world a false alarm. November gave it a war scare. Both belonged to the same year, the same climate, and the same terrifying habit of assuming the enemy might be moments away from attack. That is why Petrov's decision matters beyond biography. He acted inside a system designed to compress thought. The machine asked for obedience. The moment required judgment. Imagine the opposite choice. Imagine the alert reported as real. Imagine Soviet leaders already fearful, receiving news that American missiles were on the way. Would they have waited? Would they have trusted radar silence? Would they have suspected decapitation? Would they have launched before losing the ability to launch? No documentary can honestly say with certainty what would have happened. History does not give us the alternate timeline. But the danger was real enough that Petrov's hesitation became one of the most important pauses of the 20th century. The screen said launch. The siren said obey. The system said believe. Petrov said no. That single word, spoken not as drama, but as judgment, carried the weight of cities. In Washington, people slept without knowing that a Soviet officer had just refused to believe a machine. In Moscow, families slept without knowing that their lives had been measured in minutes. The world continued because one man accepted the burden of uncertainty. There is something deeply human in that. Machines calculate, institutions command, fear accelerates. But judgment, real judgment, requires a person willing to be responsible for being wrong. Petrov was not a rebel. He was not trying to rewrite doctrine. He was doing his job as he understood it, not merely passing signals, but interpreting danger. That difference matters. A warning system is not truth. It is a claim about truth. And every claim, especially one that could end the world, must face human scrutiny. The tragedy of nuclear weapons is that they demand perfection from imperfect people and imperfect machines. Every command center, every radar station, every satellite network lives with this contradiction. They are built to prevent surprise, but sometimes they create surprise. On September 26, 1983, the surprise came from sunlight, clouds, orbital geometry, and software. Ordinary physics entered extraordinary politics. A reflection became a launch. A screen became a crisis. A judgment became a barrier. This is why the story remains powerful. It is not only Cold War history. It is a warning for any age that trusts complex systems without understanding their limits.
Today, the machines are faster, the data is larger, and the pressure to automate decisions is stronger. But the lesson from Serpukhov 15 has not expired. The lesson is not that technology is useless. Without early warning, leaders might be blind. The lesson is that technology must never become a substitute for wisdom. Petrov's Night asks a question every generation must answer. When the screen says catastrophe, who is allowed to doubt it?
In 1983, the answer was a tired officer in a bunker near Moscow, surrounded by sirens, telephones, and the silence of radar. He did not know he was saving the world. He only knew something did not feel right. And sometimes, history turns not on the person who acts fastest, but on the person who refuses to act too soon. The world almost ended, not because someone wanted it to, but because systems built for fear can mistake shadows for enemies. The final horror is that billions of people never knew. They woke up the next morning, went to work, made breakfast, opened shops, took buses, and lived inside a world that had nearly disappeared while they slept. The missiles were never real. The danger was. And the man at the center of it did not become powerful, wealthy, or celebrated in the way legends usually are. He became a reminder that survival can depend on quiet courage. The Cold War eventually ended, but the problem Petrov faced did not vanish. Nuclear weapons still exist. Warning systems still exist. Human beings still read signals through fear. That night in 1983 teaches us that the greatest threat is not always hatred. Sometimes it is haste. A civilization can build satellites, bunkers, codes, and missiles. But in the final seconds, it may still depend on conscience. The screen said the world was ending. One man looked again. And because he looked again, the world had a morning. History does not always turn on battles, speeches, or presidents. Sometimes it turns on one quiet decision in one silent room. If you want more cinematic documentaries about the hidden moments that almost changed the world, subscribe to the channel. Like the video, share it with a history lover, and write your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching.